Okay, so we're gonna need some material. Some maple right now. So, because we paint everything, as long as it's maple or MDO, we're in pretty good shape. So what we're looking for now is we're basically just looking for best cuts. All right, well, clearly we need some poplar wood. My poplar wood's covered by all my junk. I keep a lot of these drops and all this junk material around. I make pallets out of it for mixing up Bondos and paints and things like that. So I'll cut that all up into 6x6 inch pallets. So this is what we make all of our bases out of. This is 8/4 inch thick poplar wood. It's great for the bases on all of our credenzas, that we don't have to laminate pieces together to get the right thickness. You can get 10/4, you can get 12/4. When cutting thick material, it's always best to cut towards the back first. That way, if it binds on you, that material has a place that it can move instead of throwing the saw at you. So we're going to take our frame and panel stock. We're going to make we're going to build a frame that is, in this case, 35 by 22. And this will represent the top of our vanity. The top of that vanity is going to support the weight of whatever you're putting on top of there. Whether Now, making framing panels, obviously, you're going to have some kind of a tongue to slide into your dado here. So I always just cut them on table saw. A lot of people set up jigs. You can set up a router for it. Works pretty good, too. But table saw seems to always work good. Just set that height to the basically outside of my dado. Adjust the saw to the depth of my dado, which for me is always 1/2 inch. And run myself kind of a test pass. Give myself like, I don't know, like 1/8 of an inch, hit it on both sides. And we'll take that and we'll check it to see what kind of a fit we have. And clearly, our fit is not good enough yet. So we need to bring our blade up just a skosh. And same deal. Check it one more time. Check that. And she fits in there good. So we'll go ahead and use this as our setup. We'll run it all the way in here. Then we can just run all of our parts through here at one time. Grab our parts here, just kind of check fit everything. All right, frame's gonna work good. We'll go ahead and glue this thing up and then add it to our parts. All right, so we got ourselves a collection of parts here. Head panels, base panels. We got our top frame. We're gonna start assembling the top assembly of our vanity. Bar clamps only get tightened up enough to close the joint. That's it. So we'll go ahead and glue our frame on top of here, but what you need to do is you need to leave your frame proud of your end panel because you're going to be putting nosing on the front of your panel here after this stuff dries. Back on our vanity, the upper assembly is dry. I let it dry last night, and now we need to finish putting all of our nosing on here, right? Like yesterday I said, I don't like to use a lot of edge banding. Nothing against edge banding, it doesn't work for our brand. Edge banding is kind of cheap, to be honest with you. So anywho, I went ahead and I set my frame about an 1/8 inch proud of my end panel so that when I put my 1/8 inch nosing on here, it basically butts up flush, right? So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna glue this all along here, let that stuff dry, and then it's gonna take care of our upper assembly. So I have tons of these strips of tape. You know, I'll get, 10, 20 of these things. I don't know, maybe 6 inches. 6 inches. Anyway, we're gonna put that on here. And again, we paint furniture, which is kind of what we generally do, but if you want to make this out of a stained grade product, this would be perfect for maple, walnut, whatever you want to do, putting your nosing on. You could buy your plywood. You could buy your plywood that's, say, walnut, and then you can just cut out strips of nosing from your hardwood. And then glue that on there. It's going to cap off that plywood so that it looks just like a nice solid piece of wood, which is what you want. So anyhow, put this on here. I've obviously cut a notch out here to meet up to my frame here. I'm just going to start with a little strip. Our nailer. Nailers basically just give you something that you can screw to the wall for your cabinet. So we're gonna put glue on top. We got pocket screws here. Basically, this thing's just gonna sit in there, something kind of like so. We'll glue that thing in, and that's part of the structure of the cabinet. It's a very important piece. And again, you need to have some piece that the cabinet can be screwed to the wall, especially when you're dealing with vanities. It's very important. Now you can run screws up here depending on what you want to do. I got a couple of 1.25" brad nails here. Got our upper assembly put together. Now we're going to go ahead and start working on the base assembly. And the base assembly basically is going to consist of 1 inch by 3/4 inch stock. And then we have 4 feet, right? And our feet always start out as blocks. So we have to do some things to our blocks to get them to look like the feet, right? All right, so for making our tapered foot, we have a couple things going on here. So I got all my lines traced out on my feet, so I know kind of what I'm going to be cutting on my bandsaw. I just use a combination square. I like these little 4-inch combination squares. They work great. I got all kinds of combination squares in the shop. But anyway, so we've established our 1 inch dimension here, our 3/8 dimension here, and we've just carried that line all the way along here. Now I'm going to go to my bandsaw. I'm going to cut these, I'm going to transfer all my lines on the other side. I'm going to make a cut here, and I'll end up with a nice 4-sided tapered foot for my vanity. If you don't have an edge sander, you gotta get an edge sander. If you want to be a custom furniture maker and you want to make lots of different kinds of furniture, and you want to have a broad swath of things that you can make, edge sander is probably one of the most versatile tools I have. I could probably live without my table saw. I could not live without this thing because it just allows you to create all these kind of shapes. And truth is, you want a wide edge sander. You don't want an edge sander. I've seen these little 80-inch ones. Get something that's at least 130 inches because you can put big panels on here. It's great for squaring things up. You can just do all kinds of things, not only feet, but you can do big, long legs, right? If you're going to start doing desks, if you're going to do secretary cabinets and stuff like that, being able to sand big, long pieces is super important. Round 2. There's our left beautiful tapered foot. We got our hole. Slap it. All right, so we got our tapered foot center. We also have 2 3/8 dowel holes on each outside end because the frame of our vanity is going to go together something kind of like so, right? Now, you can use pocket screws, but like I said, for what we sell, we don't use pocket screws unless it's absolutely necessary. we are selling quality, and using a dowel is actually the way that you want to do this if you want to get that extra dollar, you know. So dowel will go in there like so. Dowel will line up right here, right? Obviously, we'll drill it in a little bit further, but that's going to align this flush on this end and flush on the top. We can glue this entire base up all at once. The end of all of our frame pieces for our base, we're gonna have 3/8 dowel in there, okay? And I've got my Jessom jig set up here for drilling all my dowel holes. Now the Jessom jig here is very simple. We just have vise here. We've just clamped our Jessom jig, doweling jig in here. Now, what I've done is you can see that I put a stop block here, right? So I found center on my jig. Then I'm able to take my part, rest it right like so, put a clamp on it. Then I can take my 3/8 drill bit, and I can go ahead and I can run that in as far as I need to, run it back out. Now to do the other side, you'll have to move your block to the other side, right? Now when it comes to drilling the dowel on the end of your base assembly piece here, same principle. You're just going to put that thing in there, put your clamp on there, and then run that drill bit in there, and it's going to give you all the dowel holes that you need for assembling your base. All right, so now we got a little frame half-ass put together here. So what we can do now is we can glue up all of our dowels. We can put a couple clamps on here, check it for square, and then when we come in the morning, this thing will be all nice and dry. So this is our gapping board, okay? The purpose of this is to set back of the base here and to set back of the cabinet and give the illusion that there's a gap here, okay? Now what I do is I generally put a little cove on here, just along the top. It just helps to give a little bit more of that illusion that there's no, that the cabinet is floating off the base. So what we do, I got a little, actually it's a Romanoji bit, but it has a nice little cove on there, so I'm just gonna use that cove to run along here. All right, we're left with a nice little cove on here. We can run some glue and some brad nails along here, and that's also going to square up our base, so our base will be nice and square, and then we can set our cabinet on top. So line to the back, make sure I got about 1/4 of an inch on each side, which I do. Then I'm going to use the squareness of my panel here to make sure that I square up my base. Okay, so we're on to make doors. We are just going to use shaker style door. Shaker style door is very common. Probably the most common door that's made. And it's kind of part of the kind of flat look of this particular vanity. You have just a 2 by 3/4 inch piece of hardwood that has a dado run down the center, right? Then you're going to have your rail, which is the exact same stock, except that you have a tongue cut on the end. Okay, and that tongue is just going to fit inside of your style there, okay, like so. Creates a joint, okay? Now, last component is your center panel, okay? Now your center panel can be made out of 1/4 inch material. It doesn't have to be made out of 1/2 inch. I just went ahead and made this one out of 1/2 inch. I've cut myself a rabbet along the outside here. Your stiles and your rails are gonna fit all the way along here, and you're gonna have a nice heavy door. Now the thing about doors is some people will take the easy route and use 1/4 inch all the time, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. I do it too, I use 1/4 inch center panels. But if you want to give your cabinet a little bit more heft, give your door a little more weight, using a 1/2 inch center panel will do that, okay? And you will feel it when you open it. When you open a door that's 1/4 inch, the door will flex just a tiny bit, whereas if you use a 1/2 inch center panel, it's gonna be much more sturdy. It's not gonna flex nearly as much, and it just, like I said, gives a little bit more weight to the door, which sometimes will mean quality. Set my panel in here, and I'll go ahead and just put a tiny bit of glue in here. Like I said, that's kind of how I do my glue. I just kind of get it all over the place. I'm not really too worried about it. All All right, so we're moving on to installing all of our doors. We got just shaker style doors on this particular vanity. So I got these jigs, right? These jigs I use for installing on my hinges, depending on what kind of hinge I need to install. Sometimes it's a full overlay hinge, which is a hinge that's gonna basically overlay the entire frame of your cabinet. And then I got inset hinges. Inset hinges are gonna be something that is obviously inset inside the in panel or the frame of your cabinet. They also do what's called a half crank hinge, which will set in the middle. So there's different kinds of hinges, but anyway, we're installing inset hinges. These are Blum soft close hinges. Now this style is a style that I recommend everybody use. It's called Inserta, okay? And what it is you've got these rubber deals here. When you slap this lever down, it forces the mechanism on the inside to spread this rubber out, and it causes it to create a lot of pressure inside of your hole where you install this thing. So anyway, these work awesome. They're great for going on and off, especially when you paint furniture like we do. We have to disassemble things regularly, so this is a fast way to do it. Plus, there's less chance of running the screw in there and having that screw strip out, over time. So anyway, it's a good product. I use them on pretty much everything that I make. Doors are pretty easy to install. They're kind of universal at this point. I have a standard on most of my doors, and most of my standard is basically 3.5 inches from the bottom, 3.5 inches from the top. I mark myself a line that gives me a center line. I'll go ahead and use that, and I can pre-drill most of my holes on my cabinets, right? And then I can do the same thing on my doors. I'll measure up 1.5 inches on my doors as well, subtract, my gap, which is basically 0.6, subtract that gap, put my line on there, punch out all my holes, and then I can install the hinge on the door. Grab myself a combo square. I got my pencil line. I also have a hole here in the center. I'm just going to line that up. Then I can drill those holes in if I want. The better way to do it, get yourself a centering bit, okay? Has a retractable chamfer here that moves up and down. Anyway, you can put your jig where you want it, and then you go ahead and just punch your pilot holes in there. Now you know exactly where your hinge is going to go. Also on our jig, we have a countersink on here as well, so that the chamfer on our centering bit self-centers on there just like so. Works out great. And finally, we can take our plates and we can go ahead and we can screw those on. It's going to be a number 6 countersunk screw. That's all it is. But the length is 5/8 of an inch, kind of important. You don't want to go 3/4 because then you potentially bust through your material. When you're installing your plates, you want to make sure that the arrow is facing out. All right, so the doors are put on here. You can see I have the marks from where I put the plates on my vanity, right? So now I can just throw my door up there, put a little gapping shim underneath here, line this thing up, and then transfer my lines. Now I can transfer those to the other side of my door, pop in my hinge holes, and install the hinges on this cabinet, and then put the doors on this vanity. This thing can be done. So easy peasy. Yes, the switch is broken on my drill press. Just haven't had a chance to fix it. Don't really care. It's not that big of a deal. But anyway, you can see I have a setup here. I just have a fence set up here, so I know exactly where my 1 3/8 Forster bit is going to come down on my door, so that they're perfect every single time. If you don't have a dedicated drill press, you can always just use a regular old 1 3/8 Forster bit. Done it for years, works fine, right? There's also things like Craig jigs, Craig cup hinge installers. They work great. People put way too much emphasis on having the perfect setup and being perfectly plumb and or perpendicular, whatever your terminology is. It's not that big of a deal. Modern day European hinges are so easy to install and they're so forgiving. If your stuff's not perfect, not the end of the world. We're on to installing our Inserta hinges, right? So we got to install some holes for those little deals to set that in. So got a couple of options. Needs to be 5/16 of an inch. Now you can use a brad point bit like so, or we can use a Forster bit. And honestly, I like the brad point bit. It does kind of chew up the wood. So if you're using hardwood, it works okay. But the Forster bit seems to be the way to go. It just cuts a lot cleaner. And you can see all I've got is a little piece of tape on there as a stop. You can install a metal stop if you want. But again, just done it forever. This is how I do it. It's not a big deal. So I'm gonna lay this thing on here, just like I did before. I pretty much always just eyeball it. I don't even, just again, you do things long enough, you can tell how to do things. Like you don't need to have some specific tool, some specialty deal for everything, some kind of setup. Line this thing up, gonna pop in a hole, load up our Forster bit. We're gonna go ahead and pop these in. Just go down to our tape lines. Take our Inserta hinge, pop this thing in there, a little bit of jiggle, push that down, and it's literally installed. Just like that, super easy, okay? So that seems to close okay. That closes okay. Yeah, so we're good. We got closer. Now we got to gap our doors. Sink vent's on here just fine. Move on to the next steps. All right, so pay attention to this. This is kind of important, okay? A lot of people don't paint their furniture, right? Most people are going to do stained grade, okay? You're just going to stain your stuff, maybe put a little bit of polyurethane over it, maybe a little bit of lacquer, seal that stuff in. So your gapping is basically finalized the minute you finish your piece of furniture, right? Gapping for a painted piece of furniture has to include the buildup of primer and paint. And lacquer, believe it or not, is thicker than most people think. So what you have to do is you have to set up a predetermined gap so that when after everything's painted, you end up with the final gap that you want. So in our case, we do a 10/100ths gap, okay? So right now, all my gaps are pretty tight, right? Or they're almost non-existent, right? It looks like I've got something going on there, right? So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna trace a line using my gapping chip here. I'm gonna follow that all the way along here, and I'll go over my edge sander, and I'll edge sand these things perfectly close. Then when I put my doors back on, I'm gonna end up with the perfect gap that I need, so that again, when everything's painted and I'm reassembling this cabinet, all my gaps are uniformed and beautiful. All right, some of magnet catches. Let's open our cabinet. We got our, got all our doors gabbed. Cabinet looks pretty good. We're gonna look at magnet catches now. Open this thing up. We need to install something to hold our doors in place, right? When they close, they need to stop on something. And what we use these really nice magnet catches. So these come in this nice box here. They're all individually wrapped. And if you're gonna sell a high quality product, you really need to use high quality parts. Grab a couple of these things. See, they're very nice, have a nice finish on them. We have a 2-piece magnet here. We need to find center. Okay, I'm just gonna close one door. We're gonna call that center. So take my center line, measure over 1 inch this way, measure over 1 inch that way. And then our magnet is gonna set right up against our line, okay? That gives us a great placement for all of our magnets, okay? You need to set the depth of your magnet. It's 3/4 of an inch thick. Now what I like to do is I literally just take myself a combination square, throw it out to the thickness of my door. Maybe I'll go just a skosh proud. Take our combination square. We're going to set our magnet right along there. Push down that magnet. Pull your square away. Now we have the location that we need to have. Now you can set up a jig for this if you want. The jig works great. The last thing we need to do is we need to align the magnet for the door side. So we're literally just gonna, I just lower that magnet down like so. I'm gonna close the door and then I'm gonna use my finger. I'm gonna hold that thing in place, pull it over, put my screw in. Super easy. It's easier than even a jig. Take the thing off there, pull it over. It's lined up perfectly. I raise it up to kind of where I want it to go. I don't know how good of a video I'm gonna get of this. If you line that thing up there, lines up perfectly. Closes like it should. Do the same thing for the other side. Good. All right, so now we have our hardware installed. We have our hardware installed. We have our magnets installed. You can put lower magnets down if you want as well. And if your doors are kind of goofy for whatever reason, it's not uncommon for me to install magnets down below too. It just helps kind of align your doors. But anyway, now our cabinet is gapped. The doors are put on. Everything is as it should be. This cabinet is ready for sanding. It's ready for whatever your top coat is, whether it's stain, whether it's paint, whatever it might be. So here's the finished product. After all the sanding, after spraying the primer, sanding the primer, painting, sanding the paint, repainting, this is what we end up with, a beautiful high gloss lacquered vanity. I hope you like this video. I put it together so you'd be able to make a designer vanity at home using standard tools, right? Here at the Resplendent Crow, we sell lots of vanities. I probably sell 100 vanities a year. We make them all right here in St. Louis, Missouri. This is just our basic powder room vanity. And again, we sell lots of these. It's beautiful. It's fairly easy to make. And yeah, you should try to make this. Let me know what you think. If you need any help with plans, I believe the plan is on modernwoodrunner.com. You can go over there and purchase that at your convenience. If you have any questions about this particular cabinet, reach out to me. I love to answer questions. Anyway, I hope you all have a great weekend and happy building.